Rome was not a civilization that accepted defeat. After two catastrophic losses at the river Trebia in 218 BC and Lake Trasimene in 217 BC, the Roman Senate did something it had never done before. It raised 8 legions at once, over 86,000 soldiers, the largest army the Roman Republic had ever put into the field, in a single season. The message was simple. Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian general who had crossed the Alps with war elephants and humiliated Rome twice, would be crushed, once and for all. To understand what happened at Cannae, you have to understand Hannibal. He was 30 years old. He had been raised by his father, the great Carthaginian general Hannibal Barca, to hate Rome, not as a political philosophy, as a personal mission. Hannibal had spent years studying Rome, how its legions fought, how its commanders thought, how its military culture worshipped the direct frontal assault, the crash of heavy infantry, the test of discipline and courage, the belief that the biggest and most disciplined army always won. Rome's greatest strength was also its greatest blindness. In 218 BC, Hannibal did something Roman generals called impossible. He marched an army of 50,000 soldiers, horses, and war elephants across the Alps in winter. Thousands died. The survivors arrived in Italy exhausted, frostbitten, and outnumbered. And then Hannibal won, twice, against Roman armies that should have destroyed him. By 216 BC, he had been raiding through Italy for 2 years, untouched, undefeated, and waiting patiently for Rome to do exactly what Rome always did. The Senate gave command to 2 consuls, Lucius Aemilius Paullus, cautious, experienced, deeply aware of Hannibal's genius, and Gaius Terentius Varro, aggressive, politically ambitious, and absolutely certain that sheer Roman numbers would end this war in a single afternoon. They disagreed on almost everything. That disagreement would cost Rome everything. Cannae chose the battlefield deliberately, a wide, flat plain near the Aufidus River in southeastern Italy, open ground in every direction, no forests, no hills, no cover of any kind. To Roman eyes, this looked like exactly the right place to fight. 86,000 soldiers needed room to deploy. The bigger army would win on open ground. That was how warfare worked. Hannibal was counting them to think that. He arranged his army in a crescent shape, a shallow outward bulge at the center. His weakest troops, the Gauls and Spaniards, stood at the front of that bulge. His finest veteran Libyan infantry waited on the flanks, held back. His superior Numidian cavalry covered the wings. One of his officers, Gisco, looked at the enormous Roman force and remarked nervously how many of them there were. Hannibal smiled. He told Gisco the remarkable thing was something else entirely, that among all those thousands of Romans there was not a single man named Gisco. He was not nervous. He was ready. The crescent was not a defensive formation. It was a door, and Rome was about to walk through it.
On the morning of August 2nd, 216 BC, it was Varro's day in command. Paullus had warned him. The flat terrain gave Hannibal's cavalry room to operate. 86,000 men packed into a dense formation on open ground against a general who had already outsmarted 2 Roman armies was not a plan. It was a trap. Varro ignored him. He looked at his massive army. He looked at Hannibal's smaller force across the plain, and he decided that this was the day Rome ended the war. He packed his infantry tighter than standard formation, deeper ranks, narrower front, believing that concentrated weight would punch straight through Hannibal's center. The plan was brutally simple. Drive forward, push through, break them. It was the most Roman plan imaginable, and it was exactly what Hannibal needed. At dawn, 86,000 Romans moved forward across the flat ground towards 50,000 Carthaginians. The ground shook. The noise was tremendous. Hannibal stood in the center of his own line and watched them come. The battle began the way Varro expected. Roman infantry crashed into the Gallic and Spanish center. The Carthaginian line bent backward under the pressure. Romans pushed forward. The center gave ground. Varro's men surged ahead, certain they were winning. They were walking into a pocket. As the Roman mass drove deeper into the retreating center, the crescent inverted. The Carthaginian flanks, Hannibal's veteran Libyan infantry, had not moved. They stood firm on both sides. The Romans, packed tightly and driving forward, were now flanked on both sides without realizing it. Then, the cavalry struck. On the Roman right wing, Carthaginian horsemen shattered the Roman cavalry and swung around the back of the entire battlefield. On the left, Hannibal's Numidians pinned the allied Roman cavalry in place until the encirclement was complete. Within the span of an hour, 86,000 Roman soldiers were surrounded. Not partially, not on one side, completely, on all sides, with no room to maneuver, no room to retreat, no room to even raise their weapons properly. The killing ground closed around them like a fist. What happened next is almost impossible to describe. Ancient historians recorded that over 100 Romans died every minute during the height of the slaughter at Cannae. Every minute, for hours. Soldiers could not run. They could not fight back effectively, packed so tightly together that many could not lift their sword arms. They could not surrender because there was nowhere to go and no one to surrender to. They died where they stood, crushed against each other, cut down from every direction. The consul Paullus, the cautious one who had warned against this, was killed in the battle. So were both consular quaestors, 29 military tribunes, and 80 men of senatorial rank. The surviving consul, Varro, the man who had ordered the attack, escaped from Cannae with fewer than 50 soldiers. When the slaughter ended, between 55,000 and 70,000 Romans lay dead on the plain. Historians still argue about the exact number. What no one disputes is what it means. It was the single deadliest day in the history of the Roman Republic, and it happened in one afternoon.
That evening, Hannibal's officers walked the battlefield. They collected the signet rings of dead Roman knights, the gold rings that marked a man's rank and family. The rings filled baskets. Hannibal reportedly sent them to Carthage as proof of what had been accomplished. Rome received the news in a state of total shock. The Senate convened an emergency session. Citizens packed the streets in panic. 2 Vestal virgins were condemned to death as religious atonement. 2 foreign couples, a Gaul and a Greek, were buried alive in a ritual attempt to reverse the god's anger. Rome had not just lost a battle, it had lost an army, its greatest army. Built specifically to end the war, gone in a single afternoon. Hannibal's generals urged him to march on Rome immediately. The city was undefended. The roads were open. The war could be over in days. Hannibal refused. His cavalry commander Hannibal reportedly said to him, "You know how to win a victory, Hannibal. You do not know how to use one." Whether those exact words were spoken, history has never resolved, but what followed proved the point. Hannibal never marched on Rome. He had broken Rome's greatest army. He had killed more of Rome's leadership class in one afternoon than in any event in the Republic's history. He had proven that the Roman way of war, the direct charge, the weight of numbers, the frontal assault, could be turned into a killing machine pointed back at Rome itself. And none of it was enough. Rome did not collapse. Rome did not negotiate. Rome kept fighting. The Senate returned to the strategy of Fabius Maximus: harassment, attrition, avoiding pitched battle. Hannibal roamed Italy for 15 more years, winning every engagement he sought, never able to deliver a final blow. The city itself never fell. A young Roman officer named Publius Cornelius Scipio had survived Cannae as a teenager. He spent the next 15 years studying Hannibal, learning his tactics, understanding the double-envelopment, the crescent, the encirclement. At the Battle of Zama in 202 BC, Scipio used Hannibal's own tactics against him, and won. Cannae changed everything about how Rome fought and thought about war. Larger armies gave way to more flexible ones. Rigid formations gave way to adaptable units. Roman military culture absorbed its most devastating lesson in the most brutal way possible and emerged from it stronger.
The greatest army Rome ever built was erased in one day. What replaced it eventually conquered the world.